John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. John, the Lombardi Trophy has made its way to the Sports Bash.
Yeah, I saw that. That's pretty exciting. They've sent that thing around a lot. I get to see it all the time now, so I'm not too starstruck.
Well, it's a sight to see, and we got people. If you're driving around the area right now, we're at Vagabond Kitchen and Tap House. We've got the Lombardi Trophy on our set right here. People are taking pictures with it. We've got little guys. This little guy. How old is this little guy right here, by the way? How old is he? He's 4 or 5 years old.
He's as big as the trophy.
His father's driving down the street at the red light. They hear us. They make a bust a right, and here he gets his picture taken with the Lombardi Trophy. We just had a guy walk in. He's got a Wentz jersey on. He's got an Eagles Super Bowl stuff on. It's great. But I want to ask you about tonight, the atmosphere tonight. I mean, we've been talking a lot about like this weird feeling leading up to this game, but tonight's going to be tomorrow night's going to be something different.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of weird because you have a whole celebratory aspect, and obviously the fans are very excited. And you saw all the stuff today. You guys have the Lombardi Trophy. You saw the Philly Special statue unveiled at Lincoln Financial Field. You have the big mural that was unveiled in Center City on Sansom Street. And you're going to have obviously the banner, the championship banner tomorrow being unfurled. And hey, it's exciting for the fans, and there's no question about it. They should be excited. But from the players' perspective, man, they're tired of this stuff. They want to get going.
I bet.
And that's sort of been the talk around the NovaCare complex. Malcolm Jenkins mentioned there was a big Super Bowl 52 champions logo in the locker room, and they told them to take it down. They didn't want to look at it anymore. And that's what happened over the weekend. The players got together and said they don't want it. They don't want to look at it because they don't want to think about the past. They want to look forward, and they want to look about doing it again.
Yeah, and we know there's a lot of hurdles, John, and I think the biggest hurdle of all maybe is the depth of the conference, right? I mean, the conference was very good last year. You can make a case and an argument that it's better now with Aaron Rodgers back and the health of all these teams, starting the season anyway, that might be the biggest minefield of all is navigating yourself through the competition in the conference. Because I made a comment earlier, John, if you told me Nick Foles is your starting quarterback for 16 games this season, I'll tell you right now, I don't think the Eagles make the playoffs. But that's not because he couldn't do it. He took the Eagles to the playoffs before, but it's just because of the depth of the conference. I think in a 16-game season, he's at the bottom of the pack against some of these teams. Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Cam Newton, the list of the guys they're up against. I mean, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, this conference is loaded, probably deeper than it's ever been. I think, I was looking, people ask me all the time when I do my national stuff, who are the best teams in this league? And I said of the most talented rosters, probably 4 of them are in the NFC, 4 of the top 5. Maybe you could argue Jacksonville from the AFC. That's it. That conference is loaded with good teams. And even the teams that aren't that deep, I put Green Bay in that category. They wouldn't be top 5 talent-wise, but they have the best quarterback in football, so they can beat you any week. The good news for the Eagles is that while the conference is deep, the division is not. They are the class of this division by far. This is probably the worst division in the NFC after the Eagles, and that bodes well because you have 6 games against what project to be average to below average teams. So that will help them as they try to go back-to-back. Anytime you're able to take care of business in your division, it makes it a lot easier. And then if you start talking about home field against some of these difficult teams, it's an easier road than if you have to go on the road.
I think the schedule this year is a very difficult one when you look at the contenders, John. You've got Atlanta starting this off, Minnesota, New Orleans, the Rams. I mean, that's why tomorrow night.
Good teams.
Right, and that's why tomorrow night I find look, it's not a make or break. Your season's not over if you lose. It's not one of these. I don't like to say it's a must win, but if you want to be considered a Super Bowl contender, you got to have home field. And tomorrow night could be the separator for home field advantage.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. We talked about the small sample size an NFL season is. So if you're going to be up there with another, say, 11, 12-win team, obviously if you lose to them head-to-head, it's going to mean something down the road. And that's why this game does have added importance. For the Eagles, they have to think about it, obviously, in the big picture. As I said, if you take care of business in your division, you do have week 2 and week 3 are, for instance, not difficult opponents on paper as much as some of the other weeks. You start piling up these wins and these games you should win, and all of a sudden if you split against those really good teams, you're in good shape.
John, before we dive in, we'll dive into tomorrow's game a lot tomorrow. I want to kind of discuss with you, because you're one guy who has talked a lot about the coaching changes, the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, and I kind of saw you tweeting this thread last night. I think you went back to an article from the winner about how much of an effect this might have and on tomorrow night's game with Nick Foles, and about his success being tied to DeFilippo and Frank Reich and them not being here.
Yeah, I think it's big. I think it's a big story that people haven't been talking about that much. I think it's pretty evident if you look at Andy Reid's history here and all the success he had when it started to erode. It was when he started losing really good assistant coaches, and it becomes difficult. And then you look at what happened here. I mean, the reality is, okay, when you win the Super Bowl, there's a chance you're going to lose coaches. You understand that. But Frank Reich going to Indianapolis, remember, John DeFilippo would have been the offensive coordinator if he wanted the job. But John wanted to go somewhere where he could call the plays because that would get him closer to a head coaching position. So all of a sudden, you're down to, well, not only do you have the offensive coordinator gone, you have the heir apparent gone, and now you're down to Mike Rowe moving up from wide receiver coach. And if you think about the staff last year and you think about who was responsible for the game plan and you sort of put it in order, it was Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, John DeFilippo, Jeff Stoutland, Deuce Staley, then Mike Rowe. That's the kind of leap you're making. And we're not even bringing up Press Taylor, who was John DeFilippo's assistant, and everybody wants to say there's not going to be any downturn there. Well, I'll remind you what the Eagles did with John DeFilippo. They blocked him from becoming the offensive coordinator of the New York Jets when they had the opportunity. When everyone thought Doug Peterson wasn't a good head coach, and if things went on the rail last year, it sounds silly now, but a lot of people were talking about that, Mike. If there was somebody in-house who was going to get the job, if Doug had a disastrous season, guess who that would have been? Wouldn't have been Reich. Wouldn't have been Jim Schwartz. Would have been John DeFilippo. That's how much respect this organization had for him. And to lose two coaches like that, and when you think about what happened when Carson Wentz went down in the shift and the disaster that was the Oakland game, how poor Nick played in the Dallas game. And then it was Frank Reich and John DeFilippo who went and remade this offense in that week off when they got ready for Atlanta, put a lot of those RPOs in, gave them to Doug in the game plan, put them at his disposal. And then Doug deserves a ton of credit for pushing the right buttons. But that was a great, great coaching staff. And now you have uncertainty. That's all I'm saying.
And yeah, you have uncertainty there, which means, and then do you have uncertainty at that quarterback position tonight or tomorrow night?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you always have uncertainty, and part of it is that, and the fact that you no longer have you have John and Frank helping Doug put together the game plan. So you saw the preseason. Doesn't mean a lot because you don't game plan, but you'll have to wait and see if they put in the right options for Doug to push, as I said. And then you have the second part of it, which is just Nick Foles. And Nick Foles is, I say it all the time, I use the analogy, he talks about basketball all the time because he's a basketball player. He's a street shooter. That's what he is. He's a two guard that can go off for 40 and then show up the next day and go 2 for 12. So you just kind of hope from week to week that he shows up hot. And Nick always talks about getting into a rhythm. That's what he is as a football player. And you'll know it pretty quickly. You kind of know it with Nick Foles, whether he has it or not. And I think you'll probably know it by the second quarter.
John, talk about this all in the coach's room. What is going to be their game plan for tomorrow night? What's the identity of this team with all these injuries and all these players just showing up to play tomorrow for the first time in a very long time? What can we expect from their identity tomorrow night?
Well, I think it's the same identity. I think it's going to be more difficult because of all the losses on the coaching staff and some of the injuries. Alshon Jeffrey not being there is very, very big. I think people look at his numbers last year, didn't tell the whole story of the impact he had on this offense and him being out there as a true number one receiver. And the domino effect starts to take effect. Nelson Aguilar, we all know, was great in the slot, but you don't have to go back very far to see he wasn't a very good outside receiver. I think Mike Wallace is going to be an upgrade. But all of a sudden, who's going to be the third receiver? Remember, the base formation of the Eagles on offense is 11 personnel. That's 3 receivers. So who's your third receiver? Shelton Gibson? DeAndre Carter? They just brought Marcus Wheaton back, who they cut. Obviously, there's some concern at that position. So maybe they go in a different direction. Maybe they play Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert and 12 personnel at the same time. Maybe they use a lot of Darren Sproles out of the backfield as a receiver. I think it's going to be very difficult to replace what Alshon Jeffrey brings to that offense for the short term. He's not going to be around probably until week 3 at the earliest. So that's a bit of a concern early in the season.
John, I had a listener text in because I said at the top of the show that Ajayi isn't a workhorse running back. I said he's not someone that I think should ever be getting more than 15 carries a game. And the listener said, I disagree. Why not? So I want your thoughts on that. And what do you think the ideal role is for Ajayi this season with the Eagles?
No, I'm with you. He's a 15 to 20 touch guy. I see where the fan is coming. You look at him, he looks like a bell cow back. He's a big, powerful guy. So I get why people assume he should be able to do that. But the reality is he's got a degenerative knee condition. So if you do that, you're probably not going to have him by week 6. He's going to be banged up. He's not going to be able to play. So you want him the whole season. It's what the Dolphins did. They would give him a day off each week. The Eagles have already scaled back sort of his practice regimen. Now he's also been dealing with foot injury, so that's part of it as well. But with Jay Ajayi, you got to kind of manage him. If you do want him to get through the season, and that's Doug's belief anyway. So it kind of meshes well there because ever since he's been here, he's liked the committee approach in the backfield. I talk about all the time how much he likes Darren Sproles. Darren Sproles is back. He's going to want to get him on the field in some key situations. And then his team is thrilled with Corey Clement. They think he's got an opportunity to be a number 1 back in this league in the future. They don't expect it this year, but they certainly want to get him touches each week.
Hey, John, I want to ask you about Corey Clement in the running game because last year Blunt was not only a big factor, this team's riverboat Doug, they're going for it on 4th down. Blunt gets a lot of those short yards, goal lines, late in games, wearing guys down. He's also, was a pretty big guy in that locker room. does the running game change or suffer without LeGarrette Blount? Are we not focusing in on that loss as much as maybe we should?
Well, I mean, LeGarrette's got more jewelry than everybody else. I mean, the guy keeps winning Super Bowls. So I do think he is a little bit underrated. I think as you project, remember they got Ajayi at the trade deadline, so he wasn't here the entire year. I think that makes up for it a little bit. And they wanted to get Corey more touches. That makes up for it. And obviously Darren Sproles was injured in week 3. So I don't see that as a huge issue because the Eagles have other options at that particular position. But LeGarrette, yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys who people take for granted. I mean, forget about here. Look at the year before when he won the Super Bowl in New England and he had 18 touchdowns, and the Patriots are like, all right, we're just going to let you go. I think he's a better player than people give him credit for.
John, how much of Darren Sproles are we going to see in special teams? Is he going to start out being the kick returner? Well, not the kick returner. He's usually the punt returner. But how big is his role going to be while we're on the topic of Sproles, Ajayi, and Clement?
Yeah, he's going to be the punt returner. He was scheduled to be the kick returner early in the process, and then as the Eagles got a look at the new kickoff rules in the preseason, Dave Phipps said it wasn't as different as he thought it was going to be. They were trying to sort of make it into more of the dynamics of a punt play and eliminate the high-speed collisions. But he says it's similar. So Shelton Gibson's going to be the kickoff returner. Darren's going to be the punt returner as usual. And as I said, he's going to be a very impactful as the third down back because he can catch the football really well. And he's the best pass protector amongst the running backs on this team. So it's a big get back for this club. And I still say if it's close in the fourth quarter of any game and Darren Sproles is healthy, he's going to be the running back because Doug trusts him more than anybody else.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He'll be up there tomorrow night for Eagles and Falcons. And, what do you think the defensive, last year the rotation on that line was a big reason why that defense was so good. Similar, just Barnett. I'm very intrigued by how they use, like, Barnett, Bennett, Long. I mean, how do they get these guys the time? Graham, I mean, does releasing Means say that they are going to give somebody – not that Means got a lot of snaps last year, but, how do you see that rotation working?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question as well. I asked Jim Schwartz that a couple weeks ago, and he kind of chuckled, and he said he's never going to complain about having too many good pass rushers. But I think there is sort of a logjam. Somebody's got to sit amongst Brandon Graham, Michael Bennett, Chris Long, Derek Barnett. They can't all be on the field in the NASCAR package, in the nickel rush package. So one of them has to sit. And ultimately, I think that one is probably not going to be happy at some point. Now, maybe injuries take care of that. And it's always great to have depth. I think the fact that Brandon hasn't played in the preseason, and has just gotten back to practice, I think he'll be a little bit limited. He won't be getting the numbers of reps early that he's used to, so that takes care of it early. But if everybody's up and ramped and ready to go, I think that could be one of those. It's a good problem to have, but it's also a difficult problem because you got to keep everybody happy.
All right, plenty more on tomorrow's show as we get you ready for the Eagles and the Falcons and the NFL. We'll have plenty of discussion throughout this rest of the day and the season. We're live here at Vagabond. The Lombardi Trophy is on hand. You can get your picture. Come on out and see us. They've got Miller Lite, $10 for the buffet. Comes with the food, 2 Miller Lights, and then every Miller Lite after your first 2 will be $2 for the rest of the game. They're re-airing the Eagles Super Bowl tonight at Vagabond, so stop on out and see us. John, we'll catch up tomorrow and get your pick for the game, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.